Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Basics of Life. My name's Ken Burkey and Lanise Hargett is here again today. And Lanise usually is our parenting kind of guru, teacher, instructor. But today we're going to talk about something different.
Yes.
We might get back to children. But I wanted you to tell a little bit about your story because of your trips around the world to different places of the world, working in poverty, working with children in poverty, working with adults in poverty. One of the things that we talk a lot about at Green Valley is that we are to help the poor,
Yes.
but the poor can also help us. Yes. And that's the paradox, I think, when it comes to God telling us to take care of the poor is they end up helping us.
Yes.
So first of all, before we started the show, you said you were getting a little emotional thinking about your experiences, mainly in Peru, right?
Yes, in Mexico.
In Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talk about some of those experiences first that have gotten you a little emotional today.
Well, I guess for me, I just this morning realizing how long ago it was and how long we did it. And so my whole mission work started in Mexico. It started when my son was in junior high and had an experience in Mexico and was so changed by it and so moved by it. He said, you know, Mom and Dad, we have to go. And so literally the next week we were in the car going to Mexico because he was so moved by it. And we were like, well, let's go check it out and see what's going on. And so from there, what happened was just a whole, time period of just immersing ourselves in Mexico, which is how it started.
What was going on? Where and what was going on in Mexico?
Well, we started in Ensenada is where we started, and we worked with a local church, and we just actually went back to the local church where his first serve was, and we made connections at that church, and we got to know the pastor and all of the people there, and through just relationships, had a place to go every time we wanted to go, had a place to stay, and became familiar with Mexico. And from that, of course, you know, there was a language barrier, so our whole family started learning Spanish and, thought if we want to, really be effective, we have to learn the language and be able to communicate. Right. So we started there.
What grabbed your son's heart? What was it, this American kid going down, what was it that was like, we got to do this?
Well, I think for him, mostly, it was so different than America. When you cross the border, you immediately are faced with poverty. Yeah. And children that live in America have no idea what poverty really is. And if you look at it from the big picture, what it is their government is, in need and poorly run. There's corruption that is going on there. There's different things like drugs, especially across the border, that are happening. And so the poverty, right as you cross the border, is enormous. Yeah. So they experience things like the roads aren't good, and there's trash everywhere, and they see people begging right over the border, which for a young boy in junior high is a huge shock. Yeah. Huge shock.
Yeah, I think there is that just that shock right across the border when we're, as a church, we work in the closed garbage dumps called the Canyon each year, and you bring junior hires and high schoolers and even adults. Yes. And the juxtaposition of standing in these closed garbage dumps where they've literally put a foot of dirt over the closed garbage dumps and resold it to their people living on these toxic wastes, and you're standing there and you can see the skyline of San Diego.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It changes a junior hire, and if you look at it from a child's point of view, as adults it's hard for us to handle as well, but if you look at it from a child's point of view, their senses, their hearing, their sense of smell, their sense of sight, their sense of taste is actually enhanced because they're younger than we are as older people. Right. So when they enter into, for example, the garbage dumps, or they just actually enter over the border, all of those sentences are super heightened, and everything to them is far more intense than it would be for an adult. So when the junior hires are going crazy and gagging because the smell is so bad, what you realize is that, they are feeling far more intensely than you are as an adult. Not that we're not affected by it as well, but they, as children, are very much affected.
Well, and I think, too, would you agree, children have a greater sense of justice, too?
Yes.
And so as adults, we can rationalize why these things are happening.
Yes.
Oh, the government, this, that, which is all true, but a child has a purer sense of just, this is wrong.
They do.
Yeah.
Their hearts are not so overwhelmed with just the details of life and, you know, politics and what is really going on, and drugs and all of those injustices. All they see is injustice. You are so right.
Yeah.
And which is why their hearts are so torn for the people. And so I just always say, if you're going to go on a mission trip, go with a young person.
Yeah.
Because you are going to have a completely different experience than if you go with a group of adults.
Yeah, and I'll say this to parents all the time. One of the things you have to do on the flip side, we said we weren't talking about kids, but we are talking about kids, is parents, get your kids out of the country.
Yes.
Let them be exposed to the reality of how much, you know, how our world lives.
Yes.
For a couple of reasons. It grows their heart, it grows their compassion, it also makes them more thankful when they come back.
It really does. And for me, you know, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and she's like, my family's going to Disneyland this year. We've saved our money, and it's going to be $2,000 to go to Disneyland. It's their second time. It's their second time going to Disneyland in their whole life. And, you know, they're 6, 12, and 13 or whatever. They're still young. They've already been, this is their second time. For me, that seems like a lot. And I just think if you could take that $2,000 and expose them to the world, as opposed to Disneyland, not that there's anything wrong with Disneyland. No. There's not. But if you could expose them to something different in the world, you have no idea what it's going to do with them educationally, spiritually. It will change their whole life. Yeah. It's what it does.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, and you and I are sitting here looking at our own kids saying, you know, it wasn't that we were great parents, so to speak, but we just exposing our kids to well, how did it affect your kids? How has it affected your kids?
Well, actually, for our family, we ended up going to Mexico over probably 40 times in their lifetime. Our kids went to Mexico. It was just a regular practice in our family to, on a weekend, to go to Mexico. So we would drive for, 15 hours, get to Ensenada, and spend the weekend and come home, be home Monday morning. So that was a regular part of their life.
Wow.
And then from there, we went to different places like Guatemala because we knew languages, because we knew how to engage in a culture. Our children learned how to engage in a culture. Yeah. Then we could really take them anywhere in the world and they would be completely comfortable. Yeah. And so how it affected them was educationally, it very much affected them because they had perspective. So when they would go to write papers in junior high and high school, their perspective on life was much different than the average child's was. So, they were interesting reads, is what their teacher used to say. Your papers are interesting because they had different perspective, and a lot of times a different perspective than the teacher. Yeah. So it changed their life, of course, educationally. Spiritually, it changed their life. They all have a heart for the poor. They all either work for nonprofits or give back in some kind of way because they were exposed to it at a very early age, and they definitely see that they have been given this gift that they need to share with the world. And then, of course, they all, they can speak Spanish, they can get around in countries, they're completely familiar in a Pueblo Joven, and they're completely, comfortable in university. So they feel at home in both places.
And I'm very jealous of your family for knowing Spanish because I'm horrible at Spanish, even though I go to Mexico a lot. But
well, you never, that's what's so funny is what I say always is we can get around in a Spanish-speaking country. We are for sure not fluent, and well, some of them are fluent, but.
Well, I think about that with my kids as far as, and again, this is not to make parents feel guilty, and Disneyland's great, like you said.
It is.
But boy, the benefits of, my kids have spent many, many weeks serving in the inner city of our own country, Mexico, Africa, places like that, it's invaluable. You can't even explain it. It just changes everything. It just gives them a broader perspective of life. It's a great gift. And nowadays, airfare, it's a lot easier to get around now. The pricing is way more affordable. Right. Especially when you add up what people pay to go to Disneyland or to go on some safe kind of, comfortable vacation. Right. The bang for the buck on these trips, that's why at Green Valley, when we do the yearly trip to Mexico, we take about 100 people, 50 each week. Those families that go say, wow, it's the best thing we've ever done.
Yes. I just feel like when I was looking at my pictures this morning of all the trips that we had made, I thought, what was it that continually brought us back to the poor? And I was thinking, you know what? Jesus was the greatest person with his disciples that used to go to people and just would say, you know what? I want to know you. I want to help you. I have something that you don't have. And what was so amazing about what Jesus gave them is he gave them attention, but he remembered them. They were somebody that he wanted to know. And when I think about God, that's how God is. God always says, I want you to remember me. I want you to remember what I do for you. And so what's interesting when God says that he places his spirit in us, we have something which is attention. We go to the poor and we say, you know what, I want to pay attention to you. Whether you're rich or poor, everybody wants to be remembered and paid attention to.
Right.
No matter what your socioeconomic class is, you want to be paid attention to.
And the poor are the most overlooked.
They are overlooked. And when you go to a Pueblo Joven or you go to a village where they are poor, I was looking at, we went to this lake, it was called Mexcaltitan in the state of Nayarit. It's over, like 100 miles south of Mazatlan. And we would go to this, it's a man-made lake island. Literally under 1,000 people live in this village.
Wow.
You have to take a boat to get there.
Is this in Peru?
It's in Mexico.
Oh, Mexico. Wow.
And we would go back and we would bring our friends from Ensenada who knew the culture and were very engaged, our friends that we had made in our original mission trips. And we would take them with us. And every time we went, it was the same people because it's an island. Many of the people never even get off the island. They are born there and they die there.
Wow.
And every time we came back, they would all say, you remembered us.
Oh.
You didn't forget us.
Yeah.
You came back.
Yeah.
And you keep coming back. And I just thought this morning, when you look at the poor, I think the biggest impact we ever made was we remembered and we kept going back.
Yeah.
It was like, you are valuable, you are important, we have something to give to you, but you are giving so much back to us.
I think that's one of the foundational things at Green Valley. We've always said that it's easy to go and drop in and serve the poor and then leave, but you got to keep coming back. Because it's those relationships that show them how valuable they are, but it's those relationships that end up teaching us a lot of things.
Yes.
It was my wife's birthday yesterday, and because of our trips to Mexico, and now with Facebook, this very poor single mom who we built, not we, but Green Valley built a home for, she Facebooked my wife saying happy birthday. And so there's this relationship. But when you go down there, you see her who had her house built. Now when we're building someone else's home, she's out, she's passing it on.
Yes.
And so you come home going, wow, we're not serving down, we're serving across.
Yes.
And they're serving us, so we're just friends.
Yes.
And once you get to that place of, hey, we're just friends, then all that other stuff, it's not that top-down kind of American, here we are to save the day.
Right.
And that's humbling.
It's very humbling. I think in poverty, it's like all of us. When we get out of ourselves and we serve, whether it's the poor or our neighbor, it doesn't matter.
Right.
What we do know is that we are sharing Christ.
Right.
Because Christ was here to serve.
Yeah.
So you give them a piece of Christ when you serve. When you give somebody a piece of Christ that is in poverty, that doesn't know Christ, what do you give them? Service. What do they end up doing? They go and serve somebody else, is what they do.
Right.
They end up giving a piece of Christ to somebody, which is how villages are changed.
Right.
It's totally. You can have a village, and we've seen it so many times, completely in poverty. They learn to serve each other. The whole village changes. The economic level may not change, but the village changes because it's no longer I'm out for myself. It's like we're all in this together. Yeah.
It goes back to that relationship thing. The other thing that I think is fascinating, and I don't have the total answer for this, but there are times where you see extreme poverty, and you just go, we're going to do whatever it takes to lift them out.
Yeah.
But as Americans, you also learn that what you thought was poverty, in some isn't poverty.
Right.
They just don't have a lot of material things.
Right.
And we'll go, oh, they're poor. Nah, they may be richer than we are as far as their spirit and their soul, because they don't have insurance worries, and because they don't own hardly anything. They have a simple life.
Right.
And I think that's the other thing that you learn as an American when you go is, okay, that is extreme poverty, but that's not. That's just simplicity.
It is.
And we would label it as poverty, but it's
Right.
actually a richness that we need to learn more about.
It's true, and you know, you look at them. You look at the believers in a pueblo, somebody that believes in Christ and believes in miracles. When their children get sick, there is no Advil. There's no Motrin for a fever. The only thing they have is prayer.
Yeah.
So it's when villages get together and they pray for sick children,
Yeah.
and they believe in the miracles.
Yeah.
Whereas we're just like, did we even pray for our sick kids? You know, we just took them down to Kaiser is what we did. And you know, it's so great when we come back to America and say, you know what, they're telling us about miracles that are happening in third world countries. Well, no, duh.
Yeah.
When your baby lives because you prayed over it and it didn't have any medicine at all, that is a miracle.
Yeah.
Whereas in our country, you know, really our miracles are penicillin and Tylenol. Those are our miracles. We're looking to medicine for our miracles, and they're looking to God for theirs.
Yeah. It really puts things into perspective of faith.
It does.
Of what faith really looks like. So we're almost done, believe it or not, because we can talk about this forever.
Yes.
What's the biggest thing that you have learned from the poor?
I think for me is that, you know, poverty is just a word that affects everyone. You don't have to have very little means to be poor. You can be incredibly wealthy as an American and be incredibly poor in spirit. And poverty, whether it's a poverty of spirit or a poverty because you have nothing, is just poverty. And you know, we talk about, and I know your Christmas message is going to be on joy, and joy can be for everyone, and hope can be for everyone. And for me, what I've taken away is that Christ is the answer for everything, whether you're poor in spirit or you're poor in finances. Because you give somebody Christ and you have hope. When we went to Africa, and you know, the majority of the people do not believe in Jesus Christ, you see the difference in Africa, in Niger, Africa, and in Mexico or in Peru, where their primary language, their primary religion is Catholicism, but they still believe in Jesus. They still believe that Jesus died for their salvation, and they have hope. So the amount of joy is so different. One is oppression. You feel the oppression in the country in Niger. It's just oppressed because they don't have Christ. But you see the joy in Peru or Mexico or Guatemala because Christ is their hope. And they really believe in that. I don't know, for me, the biggest thing, and which is why I continue to do mission, is I really believe that if children are introduced to Christ at an early age, it doesn't matter if they have nothing in their life. They will always be rich in spirit, always.
Yeah, and again, like you said earlier, nothing wrong with Disneyland, nothing wrong with the doctors, nothing wrong, but we put all of that ahead of this thing called faith.
Yes.
And so when you go to these countries, you just, and especially you said you see believers who just have the joy of Christ and the hope, it just puts things into perspective for us. This one story, it really did change my life because I was very young. I was in college. Went to Mexico City, went to the garbage dumps. There was a church there. You've heard me tell this story, but it was a shock to my senses that they had this church in the garbage dumps. And we went to the church service, and then they had, you know, a guitar that was not tuned, and they had me speak something, and I'm like, what do I speak? I felt so inadequate. But the clincher was they did their offering for their church and gave it to us, these rich Americans. Why? Because it's what Paul said in Corinthians, where he says, you know, in their poverty they were generous. There's just this generosity from the poor that us rich Americans have so much to learn from, and that's the fruit of Christ.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. Well, shoot. Can we just do a second show on this? And so, any last words? Or well, I think my last words are just go do something.
Yes.
You know, whether it's if you go to a church, if you don't, come to Green Valley, find out, and do something locally too.
Yes.
I mean, there's so much to talk about even locally here where we serve. And I was Shoot, we're out of time. But I was going to just say, though, that like even with Common Ground on Saturday mornings, when I first started serving at Common Ground, which is our food and clothing event, it's what you said. At first, I was serving.
Right.
But now we're just friends.
Yeah.
We show up and
right.
we're just together.
Right.
And it's a really cool thing.
It's super cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your passion. She has great kids, too. She has great kids. They're really cool, and they're really smart. It's really irritating. No, it's really cool. Thanks.
They're a blessing.
Thanks. Thanks for
you.
being, and we'll see you next time on The Basics of Life.